Alright, hello everybody and welcome to Tampa Devs. This is August 15th. We've got a really exciting presentation for you today. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about Tampa Devs. I'll give you some updates on our events and programs, and then we'll go right to Mike. So, if this is your first exposure to Tampa Devs, our purpose and our mission is a community of software developers seeking to grow together. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, we're a registered nonprofit, so we're in fact a 501c3. And on top of that, basically what our vision and impact is we'd like to continue hosting bigger and better and more fun events of all kinds. So we do networking events, we do tech talks, we do hackathons. We want to help Tampa Bay grow and become an industry-leading technology hub, even more so than it already is. And for anybody who is in the technology industry within Tampa, we want to create career-building experiences for members of our organizations for free and for everyone within all the different domains that I had discussed. So, some upcoming events. First of all, on August 30th, so we've got this meet and greet at Armature Works. This is typically one of our most popular recurring events. So definitely get out there if you'd like to just have a casual kind of networking event, grab a drink, talk to folks. In September, we're excited about DevOps Days Tampa Bay. This is one of the greatest local technology conferences in the area, and it's also the only DevOps Days occurring in the state of Florida. We do have this link down here at the bottom. If you go there, you will get 50% off of your tickets through the day of the start of the event, so I think that's about $50. Great event, highly recommend checking this out if you go to go.tampa.dev/DevOps Days. BayHacks is coming up. This is our flagship hackathon, if you will. This is, I believe, March of next year is tentatively what we're looking at. January, February. So we've pushed it up a little bit, but this will be great. We'll have more updates to share as we move forward with the planning process. Now the mentorship program, I'd like to hand it to Matt for a sec to talk about all of the updates there.
Great, thanks Charlton. Hey everyone, how's it going? A lot of new faces, a lot of familiar ones. It's great to see you all tonight. The mentorship program is steadily growing. I think last time I gave an update, we had about 40 or so people part of the program. It's continuing to grow, there's more space, so if you're new to the field looking for someone to sort of show you the ropes, definitely go ahead and sign up, scan that QR code. If you've been in the field for 10 years, 5 years, scan that QR code and give back to the community. It's a great way to help people that are just starting. We all know we were all there at one point. It's very hard navigating all the different ways you can learn. So please, if you're interested, we'd love to have you as a part of the program. Just go ahead and scan that code. Also, you can just go to gotampa.dev/mentorship. Thank you.
And it's completely free.
100%.
Thank you very much, Matt. This is his brainchild, and he's done a ton of work putting this program together. So, a few more things. Where can you find Tampa Devs online when we're not having these wonderful events? Well, our best location is the Slack. If you go to go.tampa.dev/Slack, you can join almost 1,000 other developers in here these days. So that's pretty good. We have a community page at tampa.dev. If you're looking for other fantastic technology meetup groups in the area, this is the place to go. We do have a Tampa Dev store if you'd like to get a cool shirt, much like I have on right now. If you'd like to support Tampa Devs and all of the wonderful things that we do for the community, you can visit tampa.dev/donate. And we also have a very active GitHub as well with a bunch of open source repositories if you'd like to contribute to any of those. And we're on various social media platforms as well, so pretty much Tampa Devs on everything. And now, we said that there would be a drawing. So we have this wonderful reverse job board platform that we launched a little over a month ago. And now we've got almost 70 folks with public profiles on there and over 120 registered users. So the winner of the first month post-launch $100 Amazon gift card drawing is this guy. So congratulations to him. I don't think I see Jay in the audience around here. So I'll just have to reach out to him on Slack. But good job to Jay for making an account and being favored by entropy. Now, if you'd like to speak at one of our events, please go to go.tampa.dev/speak or email us at speakers@tampadevs.com. We would love to host your talk. It's a great way to share with the community and have fun. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mike Wood for his amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to fight with Teams for a second. And I won. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me to speak tonight. My name is Mike Wood. I've been in technology, working in it since the early 2000s when I was in the military, and then got out of the military, went back to school, ended up in a sleepy little place called Spokane, Washington, where I went to school as a software engineer, and then ultimately moved on to computer engineering at Gonzaga University. So coming out of that, it was about 2008. Couldn't find a job in robotics, which is what I really wanted to do. So I found a little company that was still hiring during the recession then, and they were doing AI stuff. So it was pretty interesting chatbot type related work. I worked with them for about 7 years, where I learned a whole lot about managing projects with really big companies. Ended up moving on to a company called Capital Insurance Group, who works out of Monterey, California, which is beautiful. If you've never been, you should go. And then ultimately, through that, I learned a lot about really complicated, super interconnected systems in the world of insurance. So insurance has, it may not sound like it's that complicated, but you've got policy management systems that speak to claims management systems that speak to billing systems, and you probably have half a dozen of each inside your organization. As the company grows and scales, they sort of grab onto these old systems, and it's really hard for them to let go of them. So I worked a lot on modernization programs. You call it digital modernization or whatever you want to put on it. It's really about trying to bring systems together and help companies grow and scale. Most recently, I've started working at a company called Waterfall recently. Same sort of gig. Markel is a big insurance carrier. And we're doing the same thing. So lots of systems, trying to bring those together and create products and solutions for these organizations. Primarily focused internally, but oftentimes with these systems, it's focused out to customers. And along the way, I've had to deal with a lot of change. Changing requirements, changing solutions, new ideas, changing and evolving technology, infrastructure that has to be upgraded and managed and modified, and lots of teams all working together. And through all of that, it became very obvious that there's certain times where certain solutions make a lot of sense for the type of change that you're trying to implement, and certain solutions or methodologies can get in the way of the progress that you're trying to make. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is touch base on just some of the common software methodologies that are used in the industry. I'm not planning on going into any sort of deep dive in Agile methodologies or something along those lines, but really talk about how each one of these methodologies supports a different kind of view of how you can bring change into your organization. So without much more ado, I think we should start with just talking about what change is. So there's this word that's out there in the world that we call it change management. And really what change management is managing change. It is putting in strategic processes and tools and support in order to help a company create change and allow that change to be sustained over time. You probably have all, sorry, that's driving me nuts.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one like that.
I don't know where to put it. All right, finger down in the corner. All right. So you probably heard about these things. I think the first thing that you all will encounter, if you haven't encountered it already, is really around technical change management. So in any sort of scaled organization where you've got a lot of things going on, you generally install groups and people and processes and structures that help you maintain and manage the technical change that you're introducing. You can see this as far as our change advisory boards, our technical, IT governance committees, architectural review boards. All of these structures that companies install are about making sure that the change that you want to release is going to ultimately make it where it needs to go and not disrupt the company. In addition to sort of the technology change, we also have the people change. So it's not just enough to get your technology out in the world, you also have to allow people to use it. And so organizational change management is really around helping organizations embrace and take advantage of the change that you're creating. You have various groups here, executive steering committees, project steering committees, compliance and risk management. If you can't tell, I come from insurance, so that ends up on lots of things that we talk about as far as how do we deal with regulatory bodies, and hey, by the way, this law just got released, and oh, have you heard of GDPR? Now we have to configure our systems to forget people that we never want to forget. So how do we deal with that? So all of those sorts of things ultimately are change parts that have to be considered as big organizations or even small organizations begin to scale and do more. So, in my words, the goal of change management is to move your output to outcome. Output are the things that you do. Outcome are the things that you get. So you can put a cool flashy button on a website, but if it doesn't actually do the thing that you wanted it to do, if it doesn't get the people to click it or move there or do whatever, you're not getting the outcome that you were hoping from your output. This generally shows up in most software developers' worlds as features and benefits. We add lots of features and we hope to get benefits. Sometimes we add features that we probably shouldn't add and we don't get the benefits that we want. Or sometimes we make an assumption or we take a risk or we put something out there and we say, hey, I wonder if somebody would like this. And then we evaluate it and see if we get the benefits at the end. So, I can sit here and talk to you guys for probably way too long, but you're not going to really, I've heard a saying, and here's the saying. The saying is, the person who does the talking does the learning. And right now, apparently, I'm the only one learning. So, throughout this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create moments where we have a little bit of conversation together, where you all talk to each other together, and you get to use your voice and embrace some of these ideas and talk through them. And hopefully some of this will stick a little bit better. Or you can reject it outright and say, Mike, it's wrong. And I'm okay with either one. It can happen either way. But I'd like to create that moment right now. So look around you because I'm going to click a button and then a timer's going to start. So look around you, see if you can find somebody that you could talk to for just a minute. And we'll go from here. So think of a feature that you have experienced that has little to no benefit. Taxes. We'll spend a couple of minutes doing this. So I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to go completely around the room. But does anyone have just a doozy? It's amazing. Go ahead.
All right, we've all experienced it. Handles on doors that are meant to be pushed.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Go ahead.
Microsoft Clippy.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Shutters on windows. Nobody actually uses them.
Shutters on windows.
They don't even open after.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Very good. I have some of those, and they're not even sized appropriately for the window. So, yeah, makes complete sense. All right. So we're going to talk this evening about development methodologies, and this is probably where most of you will interact with change, is inside this framework of software development methodologies. I feel like it's a pretty good place to talk about change management. There's a lot of really interesting change management theory and philosophy out there in the world, and you should go explore it because it's going to be different than what I'm talking about. But I'm really just trying to frame this up around how we manage change to our customers as software developers. All right, so I'm going to talk about 4 different areas. Some of these are not mutually exclusive. We'll start with the Waterfall style methodology, which has a different name. We'll talk about Agile. And then within the sphere of Agile, we'll also talk about Scrum and Kanban. And these are probably the 2 largest used areas within the Agile world. So without much ado, I'll go into traditional project management. So traditional project management, software development, oftentimes gets a bad rap. It has a philosophy that can be hard to deal with, and we're going to kind of talk through where those sticking points are. But I believe that traditional project management has a place in managing change. So we'll talk about those parts. But the first thing that we really need to talk about is, what is a project? So it's called traditional project management. Let's talk about what a project is. A project is a temporary endeavor. It has a finite start and a finite end. And you try and achieve an outcome over that start and end. And that's a project. So traditional project management is tailored around this concept. Traditional project management gets the name Waterfall, and it gets the name Waterfall because it consists of a series of stages. And in order to move on to the next stage, you have to have completed the stage before. And the frameworks are designed to do this. If you start breaking that apart, then you start to lose some of the value of your overall project management structure that you put in place, and it can become challenging to control. There is one group that's out there in the US that is pretty common, and that's the Project Management Institute. They're called PMI. Project managers who work inside the Project Management Institute are PMP certified, Project Manager Professional Certified Project Managers. And I know people who have gone through this. I've seen a lot of the material myself. I've worked with people to get them to be able to certify as a project management professional. And it's difficult. It's a lot of time and energy and effort in order to get there. This is a common framework. It exists today. There's a big Agile movement, but project management under this framework is here to stay. So let's talk about what the 5 phases of PMI-based project management are. So project management, again, it starts at one place and it ends at another, and we try and achieve an outcome over that time frame. Project management starts with initiating. This is where you decide what you're going to do, who's going to be involved, what your goals are, what the scope of the thing is that you're trying to do, and you work through all of this in initiation. Once you've completed your initiation, you know what you're going to do and how you're going to go, what outcome you're trying to achieve, and who needs to be involved, you move into a planning phase. And in the planning phase, you are planning out exactly how your project is going to go. What things need to be accomplished, what the schedule is going to look like, what your budget is, and you're using all of that information to plan out the project from the start to its beginning. Or, sorry, from its start to its end, from its beginning to its end. Thank you, Mike. Once your planning is complete, that's when you can begin execution. Execution is using your plan and executing on the things that you've said you're going to do inside your plan, step by step. It could be a very big plan. It could involve lots and lots of people. There could be multiple streams of work happening all at the same time. But you're using this plan to execute against it, and in the 4th step, you are monitoring and controlling against your plan. So you're using the plan to say, are we operating according to what we said we were going to do? Are we able to get accomplished what we said we were going to get accomplished in what time frame? And as things change inside the plan, you're controlling how those changes ultimately affect the outcome of your project. Finally, once you're done with your execution and you've completed all of the things that you said you were going to complete inside your plan, you close your project. And this is where you wrap it all up. You say, here's all of the things that we did. It's been given to these people over here to now use. And our project team is now not on this project anymore. And you are done with the project. Okay? And that ends the 5 phases of PMI project management. In PMI project management, plan is king. You are operating against your plan, and this has implications. If you have emerging requirements, if you have things that are showing up that you weren't expecting, if things are evolving over time, if stuff goes sideways, you have to control everything against your plan. So you have to create the necessary structures inside your management organization to handle that change. What are we going to do when these types of things start going wrong? How are we going to manage these risks that we could have to our project? And so you build these big risk management structures, you have all of these steering meetings, you have lots and lots of conversation. I'm talking at some level, large scale level, right? This isn't necessarily 2 people sitting in a room using traditional project management, but when things get big, you need to have these types of structures in place in order to be able to help control the project and execute against your plan. The plan can change, but when it does, you formally change your plan. So here's some just key considerations when you're thinking about a waterfall project or a traditional project management project. Your waterfall thrives when your project requirements are solid. If you know exactly what you're going to do and you can plan out what you want to do, and things are unlikely to change, traditional project management can be really powerful. It helps you just walk down that list and get things done and track to what it is that you're after. If you have lots of changes coming, that can make it difficult. So you have to plan inside your project management structure, you have to plan on how you're going to handle changes as they come up, as they emerge. And then you stick to that execution, you work through your change management, and you ultimately can then keep your plan on track and keep the project moving. This, in software development, is a big one. Testing, generally in traditional project management plans, ends up being phased as well. So we see big development followed by big testing. It's pretty natural tendency. But it doesn't have to be that way, because the execution period doesn't tell you how you plan out testing, it just says you're executing right now. Your plan tells you how you handle testing. So think about how things might be structured inside a traditional structure of executing and how you can handle testing. Because as you find failure, as things emerge during testing, oh my gosh, I don't like it this way, this doesn't work quite the way we wanted it to, hey, we didn't think about this other thing over here. All of that can start to move your project in ways that you didn't want it to move. So you have to think about and incorporate testing, and late stage problem discovery can be a real problem in traditional project management. And finally, your execution is output driven. It's not outcome driven. You are walking down the plan, task by task, and thing by thing, and you're marching to your plan. So you have to be really, really aware that what you're doing isn't, by its very nature of walking down those tasks, isn't giving you input on the outcome. And so you need to be really thoughtful about how you plan out your project so you can get those moments of understanding outcome. And you're not just doing the 57 JIRAs that have been put inside your board and now you're just walking through them inside this project timeline, right? Think about outcomes along with your overall project. So, another moment before I put you all to sleep over traditional project management. Talk to each other about what characteristics of a project might make it ideal for traditional project management. You're the one who's on the bus. All right. So, who has a good example that they would like to share of what might really work inside a traditional project management framework inside the software development industry? Go ahead.
When you said inside software development.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Construction. Yes, that's a pretty normal, standard project management type of thing. What about from a technology perspective?
Cybersecurity compliance.
Cybersecurity compliance. Yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see that happen. So if you are regulated and you don't really have a lot of choices on what you can do, you're not going to see these emerging requirements, you're not going to see adaptable experience-based things. Putting something in a traditional project management framework is an okay way to go. You can use that type of framework to get things. Infrastructure installation is really probably a prime example of something you can use for project management frameworks. And this would have been a great talk like in 2015 when the cloud wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now, right? But those sorts of tasks can fit well inside traditional project management. Traditional project management is really tuned for predictability. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to estimate and predict and stay within time, budget, schedule, right? If you've ever heard of a project manager, right, I keep my projects on time and on schedule and on budget, right? Or below budget. Those are the things that you hear because those are the things that are held valuable inside this project, inside this framework. Okay. Let's move on. So, I call it a methodology, and it is, in this presentation, call it a methodology, and it's almost more of a philosophy. Okay? So, Agile is this set of methods that is designed to create collaborative environments and help people adaptively plan and iterate their development. It showed up in the 90s, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, but really ended up in this group of people coming together in the 1990s and early 2000s, and they had these big brainstorming sessions and ultimately came up with some stuff that we'll talk about in just a second. But the goal is flexibility and collaboration. It's a pendulum swing away from traditional project management. You try and control everything, but we can't predict the future, so we're over here. Okay? It doesn't have to be way over there. It can be somewhere in the middle, but it is in reaction to some of the things that were going on from a traditional project management perspective. There's some frameworks out there that are pretty popular. Scrum, Kanban, we'll talk about those. There's XP, there's scaling frameworks. There's all kinds of things that fit within the Agile world. All right. This is pre-COVID statistic. It was the easy one that I could find on the internet. 71% of companies have Agile. That doesn't mean that it's in their walls. It doesn't mean that they are 100% an Agile shop. It doesn't mean that they don't have traditional project management going on. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that it is a very common framework and is seen across all industries at this point. All right, so 17 developers, they get together. It's 2001. You can go find their names. They have a website. It's called agilemanifesto.org. And you can go out there and you can see this. And they have values and principles. The values are really interesting to me. And I like them way more than I like the principles. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I like them a lot. And it's because they aren't saying no to anything. They're just saying we prefer this more than we prefer that. So we prefer getting people together and interacting more than we prefer having hard processes and tools. We prefer working software over deep, comprehensive documentation of how the software should work. We prefer customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So when somebody says, I don't like the way this works, you say, great, let's talk about it, rather than that's a change request and we're going to need to really evaluate it. They prefer responding to change over following a plan. Okay? And this is what creates this adaptive environment that surrounds what Agile is supposed to be. There are 12 principles. I thought about reading them all to you, and then I decided not to. I really recommend you go look at these. I know that it's probably the least of the Agile parts, but I love this one. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. I use this on a day-to-day basis. Like every day, I start writing an email, and I'm just going to list out all of my stuff, and at some point I go, period, send, right? There's no, just keep things simple. Keep it, do whatever you can to go get to the outcome you're after and try and minimize the amount of work that you put into it. Because there's always going to be more work. There's always going to be more things to do. And if you can focus on the valuable things and set aside the less valuable things, you can get to a better outcome. There's a lot of these that are really good, actually. This is one I think about a lot. All right. So, key considerations. I think this is a shifting scale. I would have told you in 2012, 13, 14, when we were trying to get teams to go adopt Agile in some of the organizations that I was in, that culture is number one. It has to be supported because you're going to do things differently. You're no longer talking about predicting exactly when you're going to be done and how much you're going to spend and so on and so forth. You're instead setting the stage for you to have great conversations and moving value forward as quickly as you can and adapting to the circumstances over time. That means you may not hit that schedule. It may mean you deliver really early because you were able to hit your marks and now you can go spend your money on other things. But staying flexible inside that framework is one of the ideals of Agile. You need a culture that can embrace that. Customer collaboration. Being able to connect with the people who are going to use your software or to use the things you're creating is key. Because they're the ones who are going to tell you what you did right and they're going to tell you what you did wrong. And then you can have that communication back and forth and ultimately decide where you move your product forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who do you expect that to do that for?
Customer collaboration.
The project manager themselves?
In the Agile framework, it just at the highest level that I'm talking about here, this big bubble, right? They expect everyone who's working on it to talk to all of the people who are working on it, or their stakeholders, or collaborate with the people. I think we can go back there. Hold on. So our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of software. They're delivering the software to the customer, right? We welcome changing requirements. Continue to deliver software here. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. I think that's probably the one that speaks the most to your question directly. So what they're saying is break down the barriers between that's the customer, I'm a business person, I'm a project manager, I'm a BA, I'm the one who's supposed to do that, and get together and talk about things. Because you get better outcomes. Because now you have shared understanding. Good?
Sure.
Well, all right, so this is, Agile is like I said, it's more philosophy, right? There's other structures and methodologies that become more prescriptive.
The manager I'm working with doesn't understand philosophy. Because they want to be a point maker.
Fair enough.
And they're not technical, so when you're talking to customers, that's getting.
It's challenging. Again, it's the culture, right? That's the culture piece that you're talking about. That can be really challenging when the culture doesn't allow you to have that type of close-knit communication. That doesn't mean you can't change culture, right? It's not doom and gloom, not all is lost if you've got someone in your organization who rebels against this idea of allowing you to collaborate. Baby steps. Talk to them. Ease into it. Yes?
Kind of in contrast to the previous methodology, like I like that the adaptability of it. But how do you account for certain things like some DevOps stuff or like even like code merges and all? There's some things that need to be standardized, right? Like some things need to be planned out and kept constant, so that there needs to be like a routine or schedule, right?
Yeah.
And I obviously like I do it Agile, so I know there's like sprints and all that, but how, and even in the previous one, I think you said like documentation is not as important as working software and all that.
We value it more. It's not as important. We value it more.
Right.
We want to have these conversations, and then out of that we can get,
Right.
Documentation is important. I know, I live in the insurance industry, like you're required to have it. It's important, but it's not as important as communicating together. And, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, how does it account for, is it kind of like a middle, like you mentioned the pendulum, which, is it kind of like a middle ground between planning everything before we even start working, and we're always changing up our plans just to account for any little change that might come?
I talked to an Agile trainer years ago. Similar sort of question, right? How do we stay really, really agile when I've got all of these hard requirement things that I have to hit? If I tell someone over here, this is insurance world, right? I'm gonna go put a new rate into my auto policy. And now I gotta go tell a department of insurance exactly when that rate's gonna come in. And now I have to be super predictable. So how do I manage iterations and adaptability and things like that inside that framework? And his answer was, it's a sliding scale. You can do whatever you want. The more upfront planning you do, the more locked into those plans you are. But if that helps your team progress and ultimately get to the outcome that you're after, that's okay. There's no right or wrong inside of this. So Agile's not a chaos engine, right? I mean, it can be. But it's not supposed to be. Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify, so I think the team I currently work on is really good about this. I think what Agile is more about is not, you can't have processes in place or any kind of structure. It's that they favor your team coming up with that more than Agile saying you have to do this every week or whatever. Like, we have every 2 weeks, all of the developers on my team get together and we come up with what our team standards are. You know, like how many indents do we use? How do we use methods? So I think what's more important is that you do it for your team and it's natural than Agile saying you have to structure it this way, you have to do this. It's more of whatever you want to do as a group.
I guess in that scenario, does product, QA, they all have a say and stuff like that, or?
It depends on it depends on your team, right? Like how you guys want to do it.
And I'm a Scrum Master product owner. So for me, if it's heavily regulated, because I work in both finance and IT, then it's just another user story, if anything. You know, it's another thing that I can figure out, okay, how important is this to business? How important is it to the team? Who am I going to need? And start building that into the plan. You know, it's just going to be another thing that during the sprint that we're going to potentially start going to, except this time it's not just my dev team. For this particular sprint, I may need somebody from the business side, or I might need to have some executives built in that are now part of this mini team to get this portion of that sprint done. So the idea is, you know, that there's all of these different pieces and parts and variables that have to be taken into account. But that's what the product backlog is. And if you have somebody, whether they're a project manager or a PO, that's running this properly and talking to you, because they should be talking to their dev side as much as they're talking to the operations side. That's the whole point.
Right.
The job still has to get done regardless. But if I'm asking a developer to help me do something that's not more on the business side, that's not going to help me get it done either. So that's kind of what it is. It's just another user story, another piece of the puzzle that needs to be completed, and hopefully you have a good team behind you to make that happen.
I would offer to you in the principles, the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. It's not self-disorganized teams, right? So that's the idea. Go ahead.
So since documentation is not really a priority here, how do you find enough time for documentation, proper documentation, and in this case, another question is
Let me answer the documentation question real quick.
yeah.
It's not that it's not important. It's that we prefer to talk to people first before we go deal with deep documentation. So if we go back, just customer collaboration over contract negotiation, working software over comprehensive documentation. The reason that we say working software over comprehensive documentation is because the second you put something in front of somebody, you get a reaction. And now you can understand how they're feeling and what they want to see out of it. You can continue to document. In fact, lots of frameworks have lots of documentation around it. We have user stories, right? We write out acceptance criteria. We talk through workflows and UIs and all of that stuff. That's all documentation.
So there's no lack of documentation in this model?
Oh, that's part of your definitions of done. Like you have to, like if, for me to give you a product or for me to be able to implement the new service or product or feature that we're about to do, we're about to, put that, into a big, thing. Part of my definition is that I have to be able to document fully everything we've done, both for my shareholders and for the people that we're about to implement this to. I want to make sure that the definition of what is this product, what is it doing, if there's anything as far as specifications that need to be required, so we know that the next build that we do, we have that to work with, and that's inherent to our processing, that's all part of that. So all of that's, in order to be able to call it done, the devs may have done something, but then part of that collaborative process is making sure that all of the other not so sexy or interesting things are also done on top of that. So when you're actually providing a product, it is a whole product.
So it's just as important.
So if you were building a skateboard for me, but I needed to have a safety thing, and I also need to tell you how to use it as part of my definition of done, even if you had your skateboard done, if everything else is around it, my product is, that's what we're talking about. But if I had to build a skateboard and every time you wanted me to change the color, we had to go back to the contract to negotiate it, and potentially negotiate that contract and change the scope, change the budget,
So,
everything
I'm
else
sorry
to
to
do it,
interrupt.
that's
I
what
want to
that
make
is.
sure that you guys have that conversation.
Sorry.
Let's have that conversation. You guys can really get deep after we're done here. I don't want to
Sorry.
take up everybody's, no, you're okay. I just don't want to take up everybody's time. Go ahead, Jessica.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of what we need to understand about Agile was reactionary to this was the golden age of enterprise, overbuilt, over-documented, super slow delivering software.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of values come from.
Absolutely.
That helps the working software or comprehensive documentation make more sense is one is the
Yeah, not just that, don't the tools themselves use like Jira or whatever, aren't they the document mechanism to begin with? So for instance, if a dev's going through a sprint and he finishes his sprint, he's gonna put down what change, what code he made, and the software won't let him move forward or complete that project without documenting. So I think part of it's already built into some of the tools we use, so that's out of sight, out of mind for most of us. Documentation we don't care about for the most part, because it's already built into what we're doing.
Self-documenting
the environment I work
is
in.
a good way to live your software dreams.
So the bottom line, what I think is coming to is, if you order a computer, would you rather want to see the computer, or would you want to see some document of how the computer works? So that's the bottom line is, I want the computer first, and then we can talk about the document of all these nice features that come with the computer. So it's not like one is preferred over the other, but the customer basically wants to see the product rather than some huge 500-page document on the product work.
All right, I'm going to burn all my time. So I have like 300 more slides that I have to go through tonight. So buckle up. All right, this is great conversation, and I think just to be clear, and apologies for cutting you off, I think that you guys should have these types of conversations after all of this. Connect with each other and talk about this sort of stuff, because I know that there is a lot of thoughts out there, and you can feel like this isn't helping me. But just understand that you have the whole point of the Agile philosophy is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. If documentation isn't helping you, have the conversation. If documentation isn't there and it needs to be there, have the conversation. Okay. All right. Team dynamics. Agile is really focused on cross-functional teams. Bring a team together who's capable of getting all of the things done. Okay? This is in reaction to large matrix teams where you're going and picking individual hours from this person's team to bring into your project for this little point in time. And now you're bringing that person up to speed. You've never seen it before, right? And now you got to get them oriented towards what you're doing. Instead, bring a team together that has all of those functions and allow them to work together. So just that there's a collective responsibility there that you should really consider as far as the teams you're putting together. And then finally, project adaptability. The whole point of Agile is to respond to change. If you never go get feedback from anyone, you're never responding to change. You're just doing work. So embrace that idea of how an Agile project should work and go get that feedback. Make sure that you understand how your customer is feeling about it, and that's the whole value behind Agile. All right, 2 minutes. So, how does Agile compare to traditional? I think we had some of this. Do we want to spend 2 minutes talking to each other about this, or do we want to move on? All right, move on. Fair enough. All right, so lots of questions about how Agile should work. People had lots of questions about how Agile should work, and they created some structures to frame Agile in, okay? Because it could be anything. We could do anything that we want to. So we create these structures to help us control projects and ultimately get to the outcomes that we want without that chaos engine. Scrum is one of them. All right, so Scrum is named after the rugby scrum, right? A whole bunch of people piled in together, pushing in the same direction, right? That's the idea. It's a semi-prescriptive framework. So it's not like thou shalt and thou shalt not, but it puts boundaries up to try and keep you inside the bowling lane, right? So it's like bumpers on the bowling lane. You're going to hit a pin, maybe you'll hit a ball, right? That's sort of the concept behind Scrum. All right, there are people inside Scrum. Scrum is a people-based framework. Agile is a people-based framework. And you have these roles. You have product owners who are responsible for the overall prioritization of the work that you're doing. They're the voice of the customer. They're the one who's saying, our customers need this. And they learn that by talking to people. Okay? We have a development team. The development team are the people who do the work that the product owner prioritizes and develops. And then we have the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master is the bumpers on the bowling lane. They keep the team headed in the direction and utilizing the methodology and helping them evolve and adapt and get better at the work that they're doing. Okay? And finally, you have stakeholders. And these are all of the people who have a stake in what it is that the team is doing, and they help the team make decisions, whether that's at the product owner level or otherwise. All right, so these are the constructs of Scrum. We have sprints. These are time boxes, right? The time box in Scrum is immutable. Whatever you pick, you don't change it. If it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I don't recommend 6 weeks. 2 weeks is pretty much the common view in Scrum nowadays as far as what your time box is. But you deliver work inside these time boxes. And within that construct, you have things that we'll talk about in just a minute, which are events. But that's the overall delivery method. We have a product backlog. We also have a sprint backlog. We'll talk about it in a second. But the product backlog is the prioritized list of work that the team should be doing, with value at the top. The idea of Scrum is put value at the top. So the most valuable work goes to the top. It's got the highest priority. We put it at the top of the backlog, and the other stuff is down below it. And we stack rank them. It can be anything that's in it. Bug fixes. And it can move and shift over time. So if we get that really big gnarly bug, or we've got that really big compliance thing that we got to do, those things can move inside the product backlog. And then we have product increments. Product increments are at the point where you have a potentially shippable product. You've completed something. A product increment is that something plus all of the other somethings you've ever done throughout the product lifecycle. And that product increment can emerge once, twice, 40 times inside a sprint. And it becomes potentially shippable. So a product increment doesn't live inside the constraints of a sprint. You don't have to deliver your product increment at the end of the sprint. You can deliver it on the first day, first moment, first whatever, week. Okay? All right. So sprint is the process, backlog is the work, product increment is the result. All right, inside the sprint, We have, these are pretty common, sprint planning. Sprint planning is designed, this is almost you are planning your work. You're saying over the next X number of days, we are going to go accomplish something. And you plan it out from top to bottom. You have those conversations. You get involved. You talk to each other. You decide all of the things that need to happen. Just like Waterfall. Because it helps people get an understanding of what the expectations are. And it helps grease the skids for the rest of the work that needs to happen throughout the sprint. Okay? Then we start moving into the sprint. And we have this thing called daily scrum. And daily scrum is a check-in. It's a point in time where we can say, we said we were going to do this stuff, how are we doing against it? Do we have any issues? Are we running into things where we got to get other people involved? What's happening? And we're touching base every single day so that we can see the progress move and we can adjust if we need to. We have a sprint review, which is the end of the whole thing. We look back at the work we've done. We make sure that we get feedback on the work that we've done. How did you like this work? Did this help you? Et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to get that feedback all at once. The sprint review is for the team to take a reset moment, to look at what has come out of the sprint, and then ultimately go into what's called the sprint retrospective and adapt. Get together, talk about the things that have happened, and make plans to change, adapt, or stay the same if everything worked great. All right. These are structured opportunities to collaborate, to plan, to reflect. This is the semi-prescriptive nature of Scrum. You can do Scrum, but we don't do sprint reviews. Scrum, but we don't do sprint planning because we figured it all out before the sprint started. Right? Scrum, but we only do sprint retrospectives every 6 weeks because we don't change that often. Scrum really tries to block you into this because they find these things to be valuable. All right. And this is how it works. From product backlog to sprint planning. Sprint backlog was the thing I said I would talk about. It's just the things that you committed to do inside your time box. When you went through that planning exercise and said, here's what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks, it goes into the sprint backlog. You then have your daily scrum, your 2-week sprint, your potentially shippable product increment happens throughout the sprint, right? As you complete work, it becomes potentially shippable. That's the idea. Then you have your sprint review and your sprint retrospective. All right. So, I thought about not including this slide. Scrum doesn't have to have user stories, but it usually does. Because we're focused on users interacting with things that we're creating. And so we talk about the work we're going to do in terms of this user is going to use this thing we're creating to do something, and we think that's valuable. That's what a user story is. You're talking to each other about how this is going to impact someone's life, someone's ability to do their job, something that's going to happen. Epic stories are just simply really big ideas that you can't do inside of a sprint. Because we plan our work to fit inside our sprint time box, and a user story is supposed to fit inside our time box. If it's bigger than that, we talk about it bigger than that, then it's an epic story. Okay? So, we generally break down epics into smaller user stories. Sometimes it's tasks, sometimes it's other things that have to be part of it, and that's kind of how we tell that tale. This feeds right back into that agile mentality of let's talk together, let's collaborate, let's paint visual pictures with our words and markers on how we're going to go do these things and get value. All right. So, these ultimately, they're meant to break down projects into smaller manageable pieces and focus on the user perspective. All right, so in my opinion, one guy's opinion, if you're going to use Scrum, Commit to your roles. Don't scrum butt. Get a product owner. Get a person who supports Scrum Master. Get a team that can support the work. They don't have to all report to the same person. They can be across the organization. You just pull them into your group and say, we're all part of this. Secondly, respect the sprint. You put a time box in place. Talk about the work you're going to do. Plan it out. Respect your time box. Commit to the work you're going to go get done, and then go do it. Don't use the sprint as just another Kanban board for you to pile work inside of. Plan it, do it. That's the idea. Continuous feedback. I see a lot of teams not use their sprint reviews. They don't look at the work that they just did. If you are delivering valuable work, why aren't you looking at it? Why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't you seeing what you can get out of it? Do that. And then bring that idea and all of the other interactions you had in your sprint back down to the team. Have a conversation about it. Okay? And finally this. Sustainable pace. Scrum says nothing about a project. It says nothing about projects. It says it's everything about long-term product development. It's not saying we start here, we end here, and we're trying to get an outcome in the middle. It's saying we're going to continue to do this over and over and over again as we achieve value. Get a sustainable pace. Right? I just talked to a person today who is at the point of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because they work nights and weekends to try and get something done. And now they're burnt out, and that sucks, and nobody likes it. Create a sustainable pace. Yeah.
To that point, what's your opinion on using point estimation systems like Fibonacci scales and such for planning out a sprint?
If they help the team commit to the work that they're going to do, then yeah, go for it. We did, oh my gosh, what did we do? T-shirt sizes was one, right? This is small, extra small, medium, whatever. Those are interesting exercises, but in my opinion, right? The idea of you going, that's a 3, no, I think this is a 5. The whole reason why we have that conversation is so that you guys can go, why do you think it's a 5? I think it's a 5 because we've got to do this. Oh, I didn't think that we had to do that. Do we have to do that? Yes, we do. No, we don't, right? Now we've had conversation. We've had communication. We defined our requirements a little bit better. We have a better understanding of the work we're going to go do, and that's important. That's one guy's opinion.
I was just curious.
But, you know, I see a lot of point commitment, and I don't know that I've ever seen really, really predictable velocity charts.
Right, yeah, I've never found it useful, but to your point, the conversation of why do you think it's this versus that makes people think a little bit deeper than just off the cuff.
Yeah. I watch a lead dev point all stories.
That should be collaborative.
Yeah, right.
Point that
Yeah.
out.
Go ahead.
Question about that sustainable pace piece. How do you reconcile that philosophy with the interests of the stakeholders who are expecting the product to be delivered in X amount of time or whatever?
The best time to have the conversation about you not hitting a deadline is before you start the project. That's my opinion. And if you can't have it then you should have it the very next day, and so on. The later you wait to break the news that you're not going to hit a timeline because it's too much work and you're not going to be able to get there, the harder that conversation gets, and the less you want to go have it, and then the more you delay. Rip the Band-Aid off, have the conversation. I don't think we're going to be able to make it. With the folks that we have and the things that we're talking about, it doesn't feel like we can make this happen. And now you've got the conversation going. So, question, how is change managed inside Scrum?
Hopefully.
And
Go ahead.
When it
so if
when
there
the
has to be that
when the continuous feedback?
Say again?
Would it be through a continuous feedback?
Management Scrum?
What's that now? Gotta use that to we're doing the product though, right? Yeah.
You can't say, oh, I need this. Fully developed document.
Somebody asked the question, I can see like every war story, like you would ever experience, which is exactly what just got happened. This is where people who are used to traditional project management, especially in executive roles, and then people who are trying to work with framework even a little bit, are tend to ignore it.
My goals are just things that I whatever I
All right. Who's got an idea? How is change managed inside Scrum? Go ahead.
I think you can kind of think about it as you're resetting your entire plan every two weeks or whatever. You don't have to obviously reshift everything, but like everything's up for negotiation after those 2 weeks, and it forces you to have that conversation every 2 weeks as opposed to not having. I mean, obviously with the waterfall model, it's difficult. You really have to think about that a lot. With this, it kind of comes for free.
Good. Go ahead.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there should be like in Scrum, a senior developer that's responsible for talking on behalf of all the developers, developer team, and communicate all the problems to the Scrum Master and then the product manager, right?
Product owner. Yep. So the super secret thing that I didn't talk about is backlog refinement. It lives in some people's philosophy. Backlog refinement is generally where you get a small group of people. You call it the three amigos or whatever you want to. You put three people together, a tester, a developer, and someone from the business, and they have a conversation about work so that they can start to understand how things go. Usually a lead software developer is the one who fits inside that and helps kind of frame things up. So that is a thing. It's not prescriptive. It's something that people do because they hate the idea of having an all-day meeting around sprint planning. Right? So they're trying to prepare their backlog.
I would say most change is managed through the data scrums.
Okay? What is change?
deviation from the plan.
What is change in terms of change management?
I think you're managing.
Change of change management.
We talked about features, we talked about benefits. What's change? What did I say change management is? Go ahead.
So, like user stories, if the client didn't like a certain feature, he can communicate that to the product owner, and then the product owner can communicate that to the Scrum Master, and then the Scrum Master.
Or we can get them all in a room and they can talk together. That would be even better, right? Yeah, you're right. That's how things happen a lot of times. But getting people together and communicating is one of the Agile ideals. And remember, this is a semi-prescriptive framework over the top of Agile. Go ahead.
So wouldn't change be the transition from output to outcome?
That's correct. So how is change managed inside Scrum?
So therefore, that transition from output to outcome, that incremental change would be in our feedback. Because as we're and going, we're assessing whether or not that output is meeting that outcome.
That's right. That's true. So we had, we manage change. Change happens at our potentially shippable product increment. This is the moment of change, right? We are now potentially shippable. We can put a change into the world. And then we manage it through our sprint reviews and other things that we have to say, are we getting the value that we want? And our product owners talking to people. It's not necessarily a trick question, but the framework here is designed to give you these moments, right? These things where you can say, we made a change. How does that change? The thing, that output that we just created, how did that become outcome? If you never look at your outcome from the output that you're generating inside Scrum, you're not getting any value out of the framework. Right.
With the question of points and everything, how do you measure what is that the increment, if that is something of value? How do you measure that? Like, at the end of the 2 weeks, how do we?
In theory, your product backlog is stack ranked by value. So if you pull something off the very top, it should be the highest, most valuable thing that the team can work on. And if the team, that's the first thing that the team gets through their sprint to this product, potentially shippable product increment, you just created the highest value that you could with that small piece of work.
But I guess other than points, because with points, there's like things that is kind of going back to what we value more than others. Like in my company, bugs don't have points because bug is something that's not like a user end, or I actually don't know the correct reason. But how, other than points, how do you, in that sorting that value is at the top, how do you assign value?
I'm sorry, you assign value by its existence at the top. The thing exists at the top of your list, that's your number one thing. If a bug comes up and it lands there, right, whether you put stories, slight Agile aside, right, story points are designed to evaluate level of effort so that you can determine how much work you can fit inside of a sprint. It's not important for the first thing, it's important for the fourth, fifth, sixth thing that gets inside your sprint, right? Because you want to meet your sprint commitment and do all those things. So we do this pointing, sorry, I didn't say something flippant. You do this pointing inside your sprint for these items, right? So that you can say, we roughly think we can get this amount of work done. The points do not indicate value. The existence of things at the top of the list indicate value inside Scrum. Oh, inside in the backlog. Okay, that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is my favorite. Kanban. All right. And chances are, if you've worked inside any any common software development tool nowadays, whether it's Azure DevOps or GitHub or Jira or whatever, you have run across the Kanban board. Okay? So we're going to talk about Kanban. All right, so Kanban's a visual management solution. All right? It translates into visual signal or visual card in Japanese. I'm assuming. I'm not Japanese, so I'm just going by what the internet tells me. But it was designed to ultimately handle and support manufacturing back in the 1940s, 1950s in the Toyota world. So it has everything to do with trying to signal that you need more work to move through your processes. Okay? It emphasizes visualizing your work, limiting your work in progress, and continuous improvement. All right. So, there was a book. This Kanban was moved from a really heavy manufacturing background in the early 2000s. It became much more, it was pushed into software development. One of the people who is known to have brought this forward is David J. Anderson, and with it he created a couple of books that he talked about how you implement Kanban methodology inside software development. And along the way, he created these Kanban principles. The first being Start with what you do now. Don't change anything. We're not telling you now need to go do training and you got to go have all of this other stuff. Start with where you are. Okay? Agree that you're going to change it over time, incrementally, to make it better. And then empower the people in the team to say something about it, to raise their hand and say, this is broken, it doesn't work, we could do this better. Encourage that leadership. On the more agile side of it, right? Understand and focus on your customer needs, manage the work, and let the people organize around it. So manage the work, not the people. Manage the work, not the people. And then continue to evolve the things that you're doing, the policies you're using in order to get better. So these are the 6 principles as David Anderson put out in his Essential Kanban condensed version, apparently. But these are the 6 principles. All right, so this is a Kanban board. I think you've all seen it. At the core of Kanban is the board. The tasks and work that exist inside the board are cards, okay, as they are cleverly labeled here on this Kanban board. All right, so the first practice of Kanban is to visualize your work. Get it all out there. Put it out there so you can see it. Put a process in place that you do today. Get it on the board and get your work inside of it. Then, limit your work in progress. It is another lean sort of idea around Kanban. With the idea that if we limit the work in progress, we move things to done faster. If we don't queue work up, if we don't have, I'm going to handle these 3 things today. If you handle one of them, and it takes me 3 days to do it, I can handle one thing in 1 day instead of 3 things over 3 days, right? It's a lean principle. The third practice, that was weird. Apparently I had a duplicate slide in there. I should go back and check my presentation. All right, the third thing is to manage flow. So flow is the movement of items from one column to the next, right? So we see them move over time as we move from in progress to done and so on. Flow is a pulling idea. So I pull work from done to ship when I'm done with the work that I have in front of me. Here, if I was in progress and I had done, I was in the test area and I managed the test work. When work gets done in development, I pull it in progress. Okay? When I'm done, I move it to done. The next team then pulls it, or next group, or next set of processes pulls the work into this next stage. And so we can signal to each other, I need more work. Right? Is this Kanban board flowing? Where is the bottleneck in this? Is test the bottleneck? Validates the bottleneck. Why is validate the bottleneck?
Because it's in progress and done.
Because we have work that is queued in front of the validate step. And if this person is only, or this group, or this whatever process is only pulling in one item at a time, they are backlogged with work. They have inventory.
Supposed to mean
What?
the one in parentheses.
The one is WIP. Yes, work in progress. So this is a WIP limit. I'm sorry. I got so distracted by my doubled slides. So for each one of these columns that we have in progress, we set limits on the amount of work. It can be 1, it can be 15, it can be whatever. But we do that so that we can help make sure that we're not creating situations where we've got too much in progress. Where's the WIP limit broken on this board? In development. So we pulled in 3 items, and we should be working on 1. Can you guess why? What's that?
It's a super developer.
Super development. Go ahead.
Task is waiting.
Because there's a big backlog.
So, super secret. This is, I made a story in my mind when I made this. I'm going to tell you the story right now. We have a kick-butt group of QA people. They handle everything that comes to them like that. They're super quick. They're piling up work here, and we can't get it validated and out the door. We have a development team that's a little bit stressed. However, this QA group checked card number 6 and found it to be insufficiently done, and they moved it back to in progress. And they found card number 8, and they found it to be insufficiently done, and moved it back to in progress. And the development team had already picked up card 12. So now we have too much work in progress because of the way that our board functions. And our team that is awesome here is killing it. But they're creating backlogs.
So in this
Sorry, they're
scenario,
creating inventory.
what would you do? Take people off the QA team so you don't need as much capacity?
No. We would make sure that we have the right policies in place on how work should move so that we have less defects coming from development into test, right? We start talking about what happened here. And can we do things to help support that? Are we doing everything that we need to here in test? Do we have not enough, are we doing the right things? Are we doing the right things here in validate? And you start talking about your policies and make them explicit. In order for you to move this work to over here, we need you to check your code in, we need a code review, we need a whatever that is. And you have that conversation and you make them explicit in Kanban. So that you can say, that's good, this is bad, right? That can't move over here. I can't pull it from done because you didn't do X, Y, and Z. Right? Okay. And I'm going to answer your question. It's a couple of practices ahead. I'll get there. But feedback loops is the other piece here, right? So having conversations about how things have progressed, looking at the metrics, getting regular feedback on how work is moving throughout the board. The whole idea is to maximize your efficiency across the Kanban board, right? And then improve and evolve. So the question is, do we just let some people go on test because our developers can't keep up with them? Or do we figure out a way to help the development team?
Or do we move them to the development team?
Or do we move them to the development team? And how do you help this person? You have those conversations. How can we help? We're not flowing. Work isn't moving across the board the way we want to. So how do we help each other? All right.
Well, I mean, in most cases, wouldn't people just kind of jump over the lines and
Yes.
validate board the validate team?
It depends upon what the responsibility of the validate team is. If they are the end-all be-all authority on whether or not that thing can be shipped, it would be hard to put a tester who just tested his own code into validate, right?
Microsoft did.
Fair enough.
Well, in this example, the testers are testing the dev team's code, right? So,
Yeah, fair enough. This is not team-based. Okay? What this is it's just visualizing the work and the process that we have in order to move work. We oftentimes think team-based, right? Oh, well, the people who support the backlog are the product owners. The people who support development and test are the team. The people who support validation are the product owners. The people who support shipping it are the DevOps team or whomever, right? This is completely made up, right? Fabricated out of my own mind. And it may not even apply to the things that you do. But the intent here is to talk about the work, not about the people. This is how we move work. This is how we manage work. You all figure out how to best organize around the work that we need to do. In which case, yeah, tester. Oh, hey man, I generated all this automated testing now, and because we're talking about it up here in the backlog before we select things, I know exactly what we're going to do. So my test automation is running well before these guys get here, and as soon as it's done, it's out the door. So great, we've got some capacity. Maybe you can come over and help develop, to your point. whatever those stories are that you create, the goal is to manage the work, not the people. The people will organize around the work. All right. So, common uses for Kanban, feature development workflow. I think you've all seen that. Bug tracking and issue resolution. This, honestly, in one guy's opinion, this is really powerful from a bug tracking and issue resolution perspective, because we're not operating inside a time box, right? We're operating off the queue and flow, and as things come in, we prioritize things to the top, and we take the most valuable thing off the top. Maintenance and support, similar sort of thing. Operations infrastructure, all of those sorts of things where you're getting continuous work brought towards you, and it's not planful work, it's just emerging over time. Kanban really works well inside that view. Because continuous improvement is about inspecting things and adapting, you expect to see emergent work, and Kanban can help support you with emergent work. All right, so key considerations. Prioritization. If you're going to create a workflow to move work across your Kanban board, and you're going to manage that work, you want to make sure that you're explicitly prioritizing your work. Kanban is a framework to manage work. It doesn't tell you the people that are involved. It's saying the people get to decide how to get involved. So just make sure that you're working through the things that are most valuable. I see bugs all the time that are less important get developed because somebody had it right there in their hand. That's okay, if it's small, and yeah, we can do that, but is that the most valuable thing that somebody should be working on? In this world, if we're prioritizing continuously, then we know, right? We can see it. We can signal to each other that that's the most important. Planning. Kanban is incremental. So you need structures outside of Kanban to get anything that's really big planned and scaled. Right? So if you've got big feature development that's going on, you've got to somehow get that work to flow through the Kanban board. And Kanban doesn't tell you how to do that. So it is a work management tool. So consider those methods you would use for long-term planning. Team support. So we talked about it, right? Kanban is going to show you where your bottlenecks are. When you find your bottlenecks, you got to figure out how you manage around that so that you can remove those bottlenecks. Because it's no use just sitting there watching work, right? My developer's just twiddling his thumbs because he's not allowed to pull any more work into the sprint because testing can't get it done, right? Or whatever. I said sprint. I didn't mean that. You can't pull any more work because testing hasn't pulled any of their other stuff. And then the final thing here, the most important thing, is that Kanban is about adapting your process. Remember, it's empowering people to make leadership decisions on the team about how to help move the process forward, how to change the process. There's a concept called stop the line, which is, this thing isn't working, stop the line, let's go fix it. It's a leadership view of the world and making sure that you're building that feedback. It's not prescriptive in Kanban. We saw Scrum. Scrum is very prescriptive about feedback, right? Kanban is not, so you have to create those structures. All right, so question again. How is change managed in Kanban?
The number on the door.
Anybody have any epiphany? Thoughts on how Kanban supports how change is managed inside Kanban? Go ahead.
I would say measuring the flow, seeing how, I mean, if once, well, not one sprint, but one period in time, if there's just some, like, if there's something stuck in validation, then we have to figure out, okay, this was stuck in validation for 2 days. The last period in time was stuck there for a week. That's how you measure the change and where the changes have to happen.
So Kanban is absolutely about increasing the efficiency of your work management system, for sure. How does that lead to outcomes?
Well, if your flow is going faster, then you get to the outcome faster, right?
That's right. It does. Absolutely. What is your outcome is value, right? So how do you maximize value? Delivering faster is certainly one of them, right? That's a good way, right? You get to increase your efficiency. Yes.
You reduce work in progress.
Reduce work in progress. It's a very lean principle, right? We get to see one thing delivered very quickly across our board.
The quality of the product?
With a strong work management solution, you can increase your quality. Or strong work management process, and if you're inspecting your process and you're creating the right policies, you ideally should increase the quality of your work. Yes. Go ahead.
Efficiency. That means anything that's flowing in the wrong direction needs to be stopped immediately, so that helps efficiency.
That's quality control, yes. For sure.
I just want to go back to something you said earlier, tie it back in with the work in progress, because it's not just about being lean. It's, you know, if you have the waterfall model, for example, you have, in terms of the value you're earning out of the work you've done, for the first 6 months, that is 0. And then on the last day is 100%.
Right.
And so the area under that curve is effectively 0.
Right.
Whereas if you're on a Kanban model with limited work in progress, you're realizing the value of that effort on, presumably on day 1. Obviously, that depends on when you can launch. But reducing work in progress means that you're hopefully deploying things more quickly, and you're realizing value more effectively, which I think applies to all Agile, and of course all of this kind of goes together. But we use Kanban, that's been a big sort of feature for us.
Does everybody understand what he was saying? If I have 100 things and I deliver 100 things on day 100, then I get 100 things on day 100, and I get the value of those 100 things on day 100. We're talking about, well, it's time and money, right? So if I have a process that allows me to deliver one thing every day over 100 days, then I've delivered 99 things on my 100th day, and I've accumulated all of the value of those things beforehand. It's an extremely lean principle. Okay. But is that, if those 100 things aren't valuable, did you get anything out of it?
I think that's the difference, is looking at efficiency versus effectiveness, where you're getting the outcomes you actually want. Because exactly, just because you're going really fast doesn't mean you're going the direction you want. You're delivering the things that are important to the business, to the customers. So it's really saying, sure, we can make this more efficient, but are we even doing the right thing? And inspecting that, getting the feedback, and then saying, what do we want to do differently based off that feedback? So adapting, reprioritizing, looking at trade-offs. But really, it comes back to same type of thing with Scrum. where we're looking at, managing the change based off what we learn, inspecting and adapting, and then making those trade-offs and saying, okay, what do we want to do a little differently? Or do we want to do anything differently?
So, great point. And I think it goes back to planning. No, prioritization. Sorry, I can find my own slides. Prioritization, right? The most valuable work needs to be prioritized in the backlog for the team to pull from. Otherwise, they're just going to pull whatever's in front of them. And if it has value, then it gets done. And if it doesn't, then it gets done anyway, right? Okay. So this to me is really important. It's an important concept that needs to be there when it comes to Kanban. Yes?
You listed up the word sprint while talking about Kanban, and in reality, that's what usually happens, right? We use like the sub-methodologies kind of like all the sprints together. Are there any considerations or values for each that work against the other?
I think they're complementary. So if we go back to our picture of our Kanban board, if the complementary nature of this helps work move more efficiently. It doesn't tell us that we're doing valuable work. It helps, the whole Kanban process helps move work. That's why when we go all the way back, and my two limit work in progress slides, that's why when David Anderson put this out in the early 2000s, he made sure to say this. One is mechanical, right? How do we work? The other is what do we work on? Okay.
I guess what I was asking was, in Scrum, we have the period is set to be a week or 2 weeks or
Yes.
whatever, and this was more of a continuous deployment or
Flow.
flow. Yeah. Is there a? I mean, you said this was your favorite, and I actually feel like I wish we could do this as well, because this accounts for like one developer needing 3 weeks to do something and another one making a very small change which may take a few days. And it accounts for both of them. Like they can work independently of each other, not having to align to the constraints of the sprint. But like if we employ both a Kanban, like a visual way of like we can see the flow every day, but also have to align to sprint, does it affect like the value or the outcome, or is that okay? Like is that perfectly fine to include?
So I'd offer to you that the concept of Agile is that you adapt to your circumstances. You evaluate what's working for you and what isn't, and then you make changes. We see in common day Scrum, Kanban is used all the time, right? It's a good visualization tool to see where your work is. And I think that that's valuable. How you deploy that inside the time box of the sprint is, I mean, it's up to you. I think the principles of managing the work and not the people is a really powerful thing inside these constructs, and I think they can live together nicely. Now, do you have, if your Scrum board is, let's move all of these selected things in 2 weeks over here to done, right? The question is, do you get flow?
Not necessarily.
No. Your focus inside the Scrum is to complete the work. You get mobbing if you do it well. Let's jump on this. Let's figure it out. Let's get this stuff moving, right? Get people downstream. But as the development channel starts to dry up, day 3, 4, 5, whatever it is inside your sprint, then all of a sudden all the work piles up inside test. So those are the sorts of things that you gotta just kind of think about. And maybe if you want to operate in such a way that you're working work outside of the sprint construct, right? And you are creating flow, and you're using the sprint ceremonies to do your retrospectives and your planning and what's coming up, right? All we're trying to do inside sprint planning is to get more stuff here so that we can continue to flow. I mean, it's probably blasphemy somewhere, but it's a possibility. I think that's Scrum Bomb. Scrum Bomb? I haven't ever actually studied Scrum Bomb, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But Sounds about right. But at the end of the day, these things are all about trying to help you get to value quickly. All right, bonus slide. And I know we're running out of time. Scaling Agile. So, small team Scrum, right? We've got a product owner, we've got a Scrum Master, we have a team, we have all of this stuff, and we're working together. That's great. As soon as you start to get big projects, really big projects, it gets hard to manage all of the interactions between these teams, especially if the work that I'm doing impacts another team or we're all trying to work together. And Scrum isn't about putting 20 people together inside of a room and saying, you're my Scrum team of 20 people. It's too much communication, right? You almost automatically start splitting into groups inside the team. So Scrum tries to keep teams small, and these frameworks try to embrace that and create vehicles for us to deliver bigger and bigger solutions. Okay? So the frameworks are Scrum of Scrums. These are really common. Probably this one is less common. Sorry, bad joke. All right, but it is. Scrum of Scrums is like the it's like the junior varsity of scaling Scrum. It's pretty easy. You put some teams together. You start to have levels of your Scrum. You can go your 4 Scrum teams. They all report into a Scrum of Scrums because they operate together. And that Scrum of Scrums, there can be multiple Scrums of Scrums, and you can even have S3s, which are Scrum of Scrums, right, that run bigger and bigger areas of the division. Okay? So Scrum of Scrums is just it's an easy way to do it. If you have three teams, right, it's just get some folks together, have some conversations, make sure that what you're doing is not impacting the other team, and you pick individuals out, usually Scrum Masters out, and they have a conversation together in their Scrum of Scrums to make sure that there's no impacts to the broader set of teams. Okay? SAFe is a huge framework, and it really works around release trains. It has release train engineers and program managers and all kinds of things, all kinds of people that live inside this framework. And the goal is to interface the work of a whole bunch of teams running together and make sure that we manage dependencies between these teams. And ultimately we build release trains, we have product iterations, and all kinds of various aspects of SAFe exist inside there. Les tries to be the middle ground between Scrum of Scrums and SAFe, and they call themselves a lightweight framework, and you can go look at it. So my experience has been in Scrum of Scrums and SAFe. Never on this, although I read about it at one point. So these are just things you'll hear, and hopefully you've now been introduced to what scaling Agile frameworks are. All right. So, I think I'm done. At the risk of going really long here, does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Go ahead.
So that last slide where you have like the 3 things, are those all used in like conjunction or?
No, they're generally used mutually exclusive of each other.
Okay. And then second question.
Yep.
I've been doing Scrum for a while, or like Agile Scrum now for a while. Is there anything better? Is there anything new?
Fair enough.
That's
there's
less process heavy.
Yeah, so Scrum is a semi-prescriptive framework, and it puts the process in place to try and, again, it's bumpers on a bowling alley, in my opinion, right? We're trying to make sure that we're operating, we're moving, we're using Agile, but we're trying to stay somewhat organized around it. There's XP that's out there. There's a version of Agile called Crystal, which I read at one point, but have never used. There's many different flavors of Agile that are out there in the world, and probably growing. Scrumban is another one. You can take a look. Like if it really just abhors you to have that 2-week time box and all of these events that occur, take a look and see what's out there. If there's just specific things that happen inside your Scrum that you hate, talk to your team about how you can work around that.
I would just add to that, to your answer, from a management perspective, you have to look at who's in your team and what you're capable of doing. And I think when you started this talk, you sort of said a goal might be to understand like what different types of projects, different methods work for. I think that there is a pitfall that a lot of organizations fall under where they adopt Scrum or whatever, and that is their way of doing things. Whereas actually it makes a lot of sense to do a waterfall model for the first 2 months of a project and then move to a more agile process and to have teams be structured for 6 months and then suddenly people can switch pods because the project nature has changed. I think if a really effective organization is going to have leadership that understands when it's time to be more agile and when it's time to be less agile, and specifically adopt the rules of each of these to address the specific problems we're having, whether it's prioritizing work effectively or leaning more on Kanban because we're being blocked too much. So I think it requires very active management to understand like what the specific problem is and whether Scrum, there's something better than Scrum, there is something better than Scrum. It's active management, agile, like where people are really thinking about the specific barriers and addressing them constantly.
Okay. It's very good. Any other questions? All right.
What branch of service were you
US Army.
in?
Thank you. All right. If you want some stuff, right, there's some things. So yeah, you can take a look at these. This is some of the material that I pulled from. All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.